This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with the one thing in common. We still love Drupal. Recorded live on Wednesday afternoons in a Google Hangout. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is episode 65, September 24th, 2014, Writing a Book.
Good morning.
Hey, everybody.
It actually is morning this time, not afternoon.
Yeah, I did say we were recording live on Wednesday afternoon, but it is Wednesday morning. We had to make some schedule changes today. I appreciate you guys being flexible. I am actually heading to New York to see the Black Keys tonight.
Oh, nice. I am jealous.
I wasn't really familiar with their music until about a week ago when I was invited to go down.
I became a fan of them quite a bit, I don't know, I guess over the last few months. And actually they were just on Jimmy Fallon, I think, 1 or 2 nights ago.
Yeah, I think they're doing 2 shows in New York. I know one's tonight, and a friend of mine's company has a box there. So
oh, nice.
I get to watch a show in comfort, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome.
So, welcome everyone. I'm Stephen Cross, and here we have with us again, and back, actually, after a few, Jason Pamental. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be back.
And today's show is going to be focusing on you a little bit, so wow, what a welcome back. So, episode 65 here, we titled it Writing a Book, and Jason's book on web typography has just been released in print. So, it's a great opportunity for us to talk about the book and really talk about that process, which I'm really interested to hear about. So, can't wait to learn a little bit more about what you've been going through for the past year and a half with the book.
Well, I'll share.
Great. And also we have John Picozzi, as usual. John, welcome.
What's going on? I feel like Nick and I are not of the age demographic, or quite blatantly too young to know who the Black Keys are. I could be wrong.
No, too old.
That's a fascinating point there, because the Black Keys are actually a more... Do you know what? It's interesting because they're old music from a new band, right? Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, but I mean, I was told in no uncertain terms by my kids when I started listening to them a few months ago that I was way behind the times. And actually, the first album that I got up there is several years old.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
They've probably been around 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, and they actually they had a bit of a break between albums, and they just had one come out pretty recently. And I think that was the first one in a couple of years.
But John, it's really like, it's sort of like, in my head, it's like a cross between, let's see what Jason agrees with this, Led Zeppelin and the Beatles. Like, when I listen to them, I get those two feelings from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's still got, I think, a really kind of modern sort of feel to it. Right. You know, I mean, I think it still kind of fits with other bands that I've heard on the radio lately. I don't know.
Where are we taking this show in?
Hey, John, you brought it up, so.
No, I'm serious. Where are we taking the show in? Where are you guys watching this band perform?
I'm going to the Barclays Center.
Oh, that's nice.
Brand new arena, so I'm kind of interested to see that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a friend that works for Bank of America. I hear that the suites there are very, very nice.
Oh, good. So now I'm even looking forward to it more.
I was worried that it might be at like some New York Senior Center or something, but
no. Yeah, it's an arena kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So Nick, so I guess you don't know who the Black Keys are, but welcome to episode 65.
Nope, I heard them a couple weeks ago too, so I mean, I'm not too familiar with them. The name reminds me of a cross between Black Eyed Peas and Alicia Keys, and they sound nothing like either of those two bands. But sounds like fun.
That was just a rhyme, but he didn't realize it.
But I am definitely looking forward to hear about the book writing process. It's something that's been on my mind for about 6 months. I don't think I'll be writing a technical book anytime soon, but I've always wanted to write a book, and I've had a couple ideas for a unique approach. So I'm definitely interested to hear, what the process is like working with a publisher and motivation and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, that's the biggest struggle.
So that's what's interesting about this book with Jason is that a lot of people self-publish today, and that is not what Jason did. He's working with O'Reilly, the book publisher for this book. So let's start with Jason. How did this thing come about?
I think I was really fortunate that it was sort of a few things that kind of came together. Excuse me. And I had so I originally got into web fonts really just because I wanted to use them, I wanted to explore them, and in working actually when starting to use Typekit and using Drupal, naturally I figured, hey, module, and somebody had started one, but it was in this kind of half-finished state, and so I got in touch with. I downloaded the module, and I did a bunch of things to kind of clean it up, and I reached out to the module maintainer and said, hey, this is sort of stuck in beta land. I'd really like to get it to a full release. I really want to use it. Can I contribute? And he was totally okay with that, and he made me a co-maintainer, and I did I committed a bunch of those changes, and that was actually my first experience working on a module for Drupal. And after that experience, I ended up at a conference in New York called Future Web Design, where I ended up meeting people from Monotype who had just launched their similar service to Typekit on fonts.com, and they had this sort of half-finished Drupal module, so I offered to help, and I wanted to make sure that we had lots of options for using web fonts in Drupal, and I figured I could help get them over the finish line, and what ended up happening is they invited me to start writing for them. And so that was where I got into really researching about how to do things with web fonts and how to overcome some of the common issues at the time. And so I started writing a couple articles for the fonts.com blog, and that spun into writing one or two things for other websites. And so I was starting to accumulate more research and writing about fonts. And along there in parallel, I have this kind of funny connection with the Robbins family. Jeff Robbins from Lullabot was always a connection, and I've done work with Lullabot, and he helped support our local meetup. But his wife, Jen Robbins, is a very accomplished designer and author, and has been writing for O'Reilly for many, many years, and actually wrote some of the books that I think we all have on our shelves about learning web design, HTML in a nutshell. I mean, she's really written some of the books that have been around for the web the longest, and she's a good friend and is one of the organizers of the local UX meetup. And one day, we were, I don't know, we were trading some emails about the meetup, and she said, "Hey, I'd like to introduce you to my editor at O'Reilly because I think you've got a book in you with all of this stuff that you've been doing about type." So I really kind of stumbled into it. I don't know that I would have had the motivation to try and do it on my own, but because I already had some material that I had started to write, I felt like, well, one, at the time, there were exactly 0 books out there on using web fonts. And so this was actually, the whole process started, I want to say almost 3 years ago, from the first point of contact with O'Reilly and first started talking to them about it. And maybe not quite that long, but it was a while ago. And I got off to a great start. They were really supportive, and they said, look, we have this particular program where it's primarily an ebook, but we'll do print on demand. But there's sort of a low barrier to entry to get started.
So getting the relationship with O'Reilly was about a connection that you already had.
It
wasn't you pounding the pavement with just going to a publisher blindly.
Yeah. So I like Nick, I didn't really I had ideas. Think that I was a sort of person that I was going to write a book. I didn't didn't really occur to me until Jen asked. But when I found out about this program, what I did find out was because like O'Reilly has geared this program towards new authors and new ideas. The books don't have to be long. Mine's only about 100 pages. There's, because of the way they structure it, they're not committing a ton of resources up front, but they'll give you access to the platform to start writing. And they have this really interesting web-based platform to write in that helps you like structure and author a book and then be able to generate PDFs to sort of proof things as you go along.
So before we get into the actual process and the tools, can you describe to us what the deal is like? Can you share like what is like for someone? Is this something that you actually make money at, or is it?
Well, I don't know. We'll find out. But in terms of like the royalty structure for this program is different than a traditional book, in that there was no advance, so they weren't like plunking down a bunch of money on an unknown author to say, are you going, to get me to write this book? What they do is they offer a higher percentage royalty on the books that sell. So it's really on me to get it done in a timely manner, which I sort of didn't do, but it's out, and then the more I work at getting this book sold, the better I'll do. And it's a substantially higher royalty rate. So I'm hopeful that it'll find a sizable audience, and I'll make some money at it. But I don't know that it'll ever make up all the hours that I put into doing the writing.
So
hard to say.
That's one of the things I'm curious about. How you say you sort of didn't get it done in a timely manner. When did you kind of start the process?
Well, so probably like 2 years ago, I did a big chunk of writing on it, and had a good 50 pages or so written, and I really stalled while I was working for Schoolyard. I was really busy, and then quit there and started our own business. And again, was still really busy. And I would revisit it and write a little bit more, and I was still writing articles for Typecast and .NET Magazine, and so I was like building up more research and material, but it wasn't coalescing into a book. And to be perfectly honest, it got to the point where O'Reilly said, I think we're going to close this project out because it doesn't seem like you're going to wrap it up. And that actually was the kick that I really needed. I needed that motivation.
Pot, right?
Yeah, and so what I ended up doing was over a period of like a day or so, I pulled together all those other articles and brought those into the book and kind of shaped it. And at the same time, I had written that article. I think I've talked about it on our show before. I wrote this article for Typecast at the beginning of this past year that actually was just enormously successful, and it was really all about proportion in type on small screens versus big. And that was where I got the idea to really kind of frame everything around responsive typography, and started to kind of see how all these different things I'd been researching kind of fit together. So while I was terrible at sticking to a schedule early on, it was ultimately, I think, the best possible thing for the final outcome, because I wouldn't have arrived at that approach if I hadn't taken the time to research and write all this other stuff. And it just had to be sort of a matter of timing and the attention that it got.
Well, technology books have such a short shelf life. How is that addressed I think this program addresses that model a little bit, right? How does that work?
It does, because it is primarily like short-run print-on-demand, primarily an ebook platform. I can actually go back in and make edits and updates to this book whenever I want. It's actually a GitHub repository. So I can go in either locally or go in through their authoring tool. I could continue to update things, add new links in it, and then every once in a while go back to them and say, okay, I think this is worth a point update. Let's push out a new version of the book. So I could actually never write a sequel. I could just continually update this one, and they'll just continue publishing new versions of it.
So I purchased the ebook, and that's like an email that I received maybe 2 weeks ago. I think I got an email saying, "Hey, there's a new version of this book now available."
Yep.
Okay.
And so as long as I continue updating this one, you'll continue getting those messages saying, "Hey, there's an updated version of your book."
And if you buy the book, do you get access to all the versions?
Yep. Yep. So, I mean, I don't know if you'd be able to go back and look at a previous one, for example, but you always have access to new versions as they come out. And you'll be notified by O'Reilly's, which is kind of nice. So I can definitely see doing some work to continue to update this. But, interestingly enough, within about a month of my getting this deal with O'Reilly, I got wind of Jason Santa Maria starting to work on a book for A Book Apart. And that made me nearly panic because I have a huge amount of respect for him, and he's so well known. And I had this feeling like, okay, if I don't get my book done first, no one's ever going to buy mine. They'll just buy his. And thankfully, he was as bad at sticking to a schedule as I was, and so I ended up, by the skin of my teeth, getting the early release out before his book came out earlier this year, and then his book actually began to ship a few weeks ahead of mine, and I'm starting to read his now, and I actually had traded some emails with him or tweets with him a while back, and his take on what I was writing about was actually that we'd end up likely being pretty complementary, and I think that's true. He's really focusing on typography more generally, and I'm really focused on the typography, but how to implement all of these things on the web. So I'm pretty excited that it actually is still, I think, a really relevant and unique book. That it's a pretty affordable thing. It's like, I think it's like $22 for the ebook, even less, if you buy it for the Kindle. But it's on Amazon, it's on O'Reilly. You can get it on any ebook platform.
So let's talk a little bit about that process of writing and implementing with the tools. So you said they gave you a platform to use. So, and part of why I want to ask this question is, how would you recommend someone, probably not establishing a relationship with a publisher, but how would you recommend someone organizing their thoughts and putting what their concept is down on paper?
I started with Evernote.
Okay.
I started with Evernote, and I did most of my writing in Evernote to start before they moved me into this platform. So I had actually started a notebook, and I added a new note for each chapter, and kind of fleshed things out that way. I was probably a little haphazard in the approach, and that's what led me to do a lot of reorganizing later on. I would just, like, with any topic that came up, I would just make it a chapter, and then I would start writing, and I'd see if there was enough there to make it a chapter, or if it kind of worked well with other things to kind of combine it back. And that process actually went on throughout the book, and then I ended up kind of sectioning it into two parts, where the first one was really about typography and the history of type on the web, and then the second part is really focused on implementation. But then I had to kind of think about the reader. So I mean, when I first started, like, I wrote a couple paragraphs to kind of get straight in my head what I was introducing, and that helped. So I had this initial thing that I wrote down, like, okay, who I wanted to write it for, and why they would find it useful, and kind of sketched out. It was almost like creating personas, to kind of get an understanding in my own head of, like, why would a front-end developer pick up this book? Why would a designer pick up this book? And more importantly, why would a traditionally educated, probably originally a print designer, be able to use this book, or why would they want to, versus a web designer who may have come at this from a different background and does not have the traditional education in typography. So there's three different audiences there that all have different needs.
Well, that's something I'm curious about. Did the tool that O'Reilly provided provide options for kind of storing metadata about the book like that? Or did you kind of just put it in the book and take it out when you were, or keep it somewhere separate?
Well, so the platform, before I talk too much about the platform, I think it was very helpful to start by kind of writing that guidepost, like who am I doing this for, and like kind of get that straight in my own mind, and then started to kind of list the things that I wanted to cover and think about the flow of like in what order would it make sense to talk about these things. And so that was about the extent of the organization that I started with, and then it was really just in Evernote writing, and then eventually I was working on it long enough to actually use two different versions of their authoring platforms. The first one was actually using tools to write in an XML-based format, which was an absolute nightmare, and it was a terrible tool. And then they launched this other platform called Atlas, and that is one that I can log into now. It's a repository. I can use TextMate on my own machine. I mean, it's using the ASCII doc format, which is kind of similar to Markdown. So it's pretty easy to work with, to structure things, to make headings and subheads and stuff. And then it's far easier to use the online version of Atlas to do things like add images and tables and stuff like that. It's just the tools that are built into the editor there make it easier to add those sorts of things. But I mean, essentially what you're doing is like editing tags in a way, like tokens almost, when you're doing that. So you're like making references for footnotes and things like that. So anytime you add an image, then you need to add a reference to it in text, and then like there's certain syntax that you have to follow. And
so I'm not sure we want to do a tutorial on Atlas today. So
well, anyway, it was
Jason, let me ask you a question here. What would you do differently for the next book in terms of organizing yourself ahead of time? It sounds like you kind of just went through this and were just doing whatever you need to do at the time. Now that you've had a little chance to reflect on it, how would you structure yourself differently?
Well, I would do the things that I described more thoroughly, and with a lot more collaboration, I think, with an editor to start with. So O'Reilly was somewhat hands-off during that initial process. So there wasn't like I was sitting down and talking with an editor for hours on end to say, flesh all these things out and have all of the insight and knowledge from that editor to say, well, these are the things that are going to trip you up, so concentrate on working these things out first and that kind of thing. So
you have access to an editor and just chose not to use it, or did you not have access at all early on?
I probably could have taken advantage of it more. I wasn't really sure how to. I mean, this whole process of writing a book was so foreign, and I had been writing a bunch of blog posts for people, but writing a book is just different, and I didn't know how different. So I think it was a little bit of trial by fire. I know better now. So I think from an organizational standpoint, I have a little bit better idea of how many pages does it take to go through a topic? What kinds of things do you need to do to structure that kind of instructional flow in how you're writing about it? How you need to support things as you go in terms of like what other assets, whether it's code or tables or images, artwork, and that sort of thing.
Did you use any other outside resources to help you like figure out even an approach to take, or did you just sort of jump in?
I just kind of jumped in, and one of the things that was valuable was being able to generate these PDFs so easily, so I could take that away and kind of thumb through it. And I did that a lot, where I would just to kind of get a sense of how is this adding up, and just to kind of see how things flowed together. So that was really helpful.
Hey Jason, how was the price of the book defined?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay, so that's
not
a discussion you had with them.
No, and I think so in a way, like O'Reilly and the whole structure of this program sort of takes a lot of that stuff off the table.
Right.
And I think their pricing is generally based around the length of the book, and then I think maybe somewhat modulated by levels of interest, but I can't really guarantee that. I don't really know. I know that when they first made it available as an early release book, which is almost like selling your book in beta, that it was much lower. So they started out and it was like $12, and then all it went to $19.99, and now it's sort of settled at $21.99 as I wrote more.
Right.
Um,
Did you have a lot of early adopters for the beta versions of the book?
Actually, I think it was pretty good. I mean, I think that we sold about 300 copies during that early release period.
Mm-hmm.
So there were actually a fair number of people. So I was told that for a niche market book like this, they would be happy if I sold 2,000 to 3,000 copies.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And right now, with the book having been officially released less than a week, I think it's around 600.
Right.
So I'm pretty happy with where it is. And last week when I was in Toronto for the Web Unleashed, I got an email the next day after my talk from my editor, and she said I sold like 200 books that day. So I mean, it's now that it's like now I'll start to figure out exactly how many people will really care about a book on fonts. Now that it's actually out in the wild, and people are more willing to say, "Oh, I'll buy that because I know it's done," not I'll buy that hoping that it might be.
That raises another question for me. How about marketing? I mean, do they provide any support at all for marketing besides just putting on the website and distribution?
No, they do, absolutely. So the reason I missed the show a couple weeks ago is because I was doing a webinar with O'Reilly, and we had several hundred people sign up for that. So I think there was a lot of interest from that, and I can do these webinars really kind of as often as I want. They also have been bugging me for a blog post, so I have to finish that up this week. So that's another thing that will generate a lot of traction for it. They will help organize book signings at events. Like they sent me a bunch of books to bring to the various camps coming up, so I'll have some books to give away at Artifact next week, and then later on I'll be able to have the same thing again organized for Nude Camp here in Providence and other events that I'll be speaking at in Halifax and New Orleans coming up in the next month or so. So I'm not even sure how much more will happen, but they do provide a fair amount of support. And then I've just kind of been using my own connections and my own sort of instincts, I guess. I mean, I went because I think one of the best markets for this book is actually with print designers who have no idea how much they can do with typography on the web. So I think that going that route, I got in touch with Communication Arts Magazine, and I just wrote an article for How Magazine. Those are and they're interested. So both of them are covering the book. One of them is reviewing it for their typography annual. So I'm really excited about that, because that's the market of web designers is sort of like this big, but the market of print designers, print graphic designers, is far bigger, and all of them tend to feel like they need to know something about it. So I think that's a good audience for me. So I'm trying to do my best to go in that direction and get some awareness there, as well as going and getting in touch with other things sort of in our wheelhouse, like going and getting in touch with .NET Magazine, Smashing Magazine, the other sort of more web-centric outlets for who we are and what we do.
So, like, just to follow up on Nick's question, so and I've heard this from other authors, that a lot of the promotion falls on the author's shoulders if they want to make some money on it, right?
I think so, and I'm not sure, especially so. O'Reilly doesn't do a lot of design books. They're trying to change that, and this was one of the ones that is out now, like really focused very much in that for that audience. So I think they have things geared up, like they have conferences and everything else that are all about technology, and they always have their authors come and speak at these events. So they're not, I think, quite as geared up to market towards a design audience.
Right.
And so that's where I think it's it behooves me to put some effort into it because I think that there's a market for the book, and I don't necessarily think I'm going to make a killing on the book, but I think it certainly is a great way to raise awareness of what I have learned about this and what I can help bring to other teams. So, being able to go to a publisher and say, hey, I can help you bring your typographic style to the web, and here's a book, and people take note of that. So,
Jason, I imagine that writing a book is similar in either writing a blog post or teaching a seminar somewhere, that it sort of forces you to learn something a lot different than just on a superficial level. So what is, you have some comments on just your general experience and knowledge and what you learned from actually writing the book itself?
Oh my gosh, I just learned a ton. And it is true. I mean, it's similar to like writing a blog post or putting together a talk. I mean, you really have to kind of dig into it and understand it well enough to be able to explain it. But more importantly, especially in the longer term process with writing a book, you got to document how you got there. And so that's the thing that I think was the hardest thing to kind of drill into myself. Never read an article without bookmarking it. Never look at a piece of source code without bookmarking it, and making sure that all the projects that you find on GitHub and everywhere else, that you sort of collect these references, and that's really and then use them. So like actually having the source code that goes along with it has been awesome, because that way I'm sort of figuring out how all these things work and how they work together, and so now I have this nice collection of tips and tricks that's also supported with this sample website, basically, that people can download and get all of this stuff to play with, and build it into their own project. And it's got tons of comments and help, and I'm adding to that all the time.
Jason, where is the best place for someone to find this book and buy it? Is it just do a search online, go to Amazon? Does it matter to you as an author where they buy it? I'm just curious about that too.
I think they're all good outlets. Apparently, it's doing really well in Amazon UK, and I'm really happy about that. I think by buying it directly from O'Reilly, you get all of, like if you get the ebook format, you get all of them, which is really nice. You get it in PDF and .mobi and .epub, so you can look at it on any device, and it's also DRM free, which is great.
If you get the Kindle edition from Amazon, do you get the updates as they come out as well?
I actually have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know. That's actually a really good question. So I mean, if you buy it through Amazon, through O'Reilly, I know you get notified.
Right.
I don't know how that works with Amazon. I'm gonna have to find out.
Okay. So where would you recommend people find the book?
You know what? If you go to O'Reilly.com and search for Responsive Typography, you'll find it. Or you can go to bit.ly.com/rwtbook, and that'll take you directly to the O'Reilly page. And you can get the book or the package. And it's actually pretty inexpensive to get the print book and the ebook collection together if you're so inclined. And there it is.
There it is. Yep. Excellent.
Yep.
Is that a pelican?
It is. It is a crested pelican. And if you look on the O'Reilly website, there's actually a tab to read the colophon, and you can read all about it. Fascinating little animal.
Do you get to choose the animal?
Oh no, that it doesn't matter how great the book is. That is still the most common question that I get. Do you get to choose the animal? And apparently, it is a deep, dark secret ritual that goes on in the design group at O'Reilly. So we know nothing about it. I have just been ordained pelican. But as occurred to me last night, pelican has a responsive gullet. I think that's pretty awesome.
Interesting.
Maybe that's the key. Well, congratulations, Jason.
Thank you. It's been a long process.
Yeah, I know you went through some difficult times early on, and it's just great to see a final product here. So.
Yeah, well, and you guys have been awesome, and I also want to kind of call out Josh Clark and Jen Robbins for really encouraging me early on. And Jen and Aaron Gustafson gave me fantastic technical reviews. They really helped shape the book into a really good read. And Aaron wrote a great foreword for me, and Josh gave me a great quote for the back cover. So I mean, it's really been awesome to have that kind of support from the web community as a whole.
Oh, great. So let's congratulations again. Let's move on to our module of the week, Commerce Coupon. I think Nick, you put this in here?
Yep, Commerce Coupon is a module that I looked at a long time ago but didn't use until recently. We're using it on the NewdCamp, NEWD Camp website to give discounts to our speakers and sponsors. I found it to be a very easy setup. There was a dependency, I believe, commerce percentage to get the percentage, piece of the coupon, but it was a very quick setup, very easy. You can limit the number of times the coupon is used. I believe you can limit the number of times an individual uses the coupon as well. But I found it very simple, much easier than setting up the rules yourself. I'd recommend it if you need to give discounts.
It's one of those modules that's frustrating that it's still sitting out there in alpha, right?
Yeah. I don't want to get on my soapbox about alpha, beta, dev.
Right.
So, but I can highly recommend it. It was very useful, very easy to set up.
Yeah, I'd second that. I've used that quite a bit as well.
Okay, so let's move to our close for the week. So a nice, short, quick show today. Thank you guys for So Jason, where can people find you online? And one more time, where can they find that book?
You can find me online at jpamental, pretty much anywhere. hwdesignco.com if you want to see our work. And if you would like to find out about the book, you can go to rwt.io, and that will take you to a simple one-pager up there for the book, and with a link over to the O'Reilly site to buy it if you want to. And I'm going to be around and about in person next week here in Providence at the Artifact Conference talking about responsive typography, and then later in the week up in Boston at Fresh Tilled Soil with their event UX Fest, and I'll be talking about responsive typography there as well.
Very good. How about you, John?
You can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi and always on at oomfink.com.
No, John, I don't think you made one comment today. Now that I'm sitting back here, I don't think you said a word the entire time.
Nope. I was listening. I was enthralled by the writing process.
I'm so glad that we're paying you by word.
Yeah. I did not earn a paycheck today, folks.
And Nick Laughlin.
You can find me online at Nixvan, NICXVAN, and in 5 weeks at NewdCamp.
I would encourage anyone who does not have a ticket for NewdCamp and is planning on going, you should probably get a ticket as soon as you can. There is limited seating, and the tickets are starting to sell. So don't wait till the last minute because you may be sorry, or you just may be standing outside looking in. So.
Well, and you got to go to newdcamp.com and check out all the sessions that have been accepted, because it's really a pretty exceptional list of talks. It really is. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a really good day. We promise that you will have a good time, and it will be worth your $20 admission. So Thank you, everyone. I'm Stephen Cross. You can find me at Stephen Cross with a PH, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Have a good week.